we have to be dedicated, I mean dedicated, to at least as much interest in our menu, our provenance for our food, as we are in, what our kids are learning in school, the kind of car we're going to buy, the pediatrician we get. Goodness, a vacation, right? Where are you going to go on vacation? Well, think of the time and planning to that. Our body's fuel requires that level of attention as well. It doesn't just magically appear. Fortunately, there are way more options now than there were just 20 years ago. Way more options. And that's what we want to talk about.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Beyond Labels. I'm Dr. Sina McCullough with Joel Salatin, everyone's favorite farmer. Hi, Joel.
Hi, Sina.
I'm so excited to be with you today. Last week, we left off talking about the new bioengineered labeling law, right? The new GMO labeling law. And we said we were going to talk about solutions. And I want to point out that when the new labeling law came out, I actually didn't even look at it for a couple weeks because it doesn't affect me, right? Because I've already found my solution, and which is buying authentic food from my local farmers. And so this is something that I think is very critical for people to understand, that if you haven't yet found an authentic food supply, you are going to be at the whim of the government and the lobbyists and these regulators, the bureaucracy, and how they change the rules, right? And how complicated the rules are and how complex this system is. So I opt out of the system.
And Sina, and actually, as we showed last week, how unresponsive or unhelpful, just we'll say unhelpful, the labeling laws are, even when they're passed by people that you hope would have your interests at heart. These officials, the agricultural industrial complex, does not have our benefits in mind, and so the whole labeling gig becomes suspect. That's the idea.
Exactly. And you and I list out a lot of examples in our book, Beyond Labels, right? About all of these labeling loopholes and nuances. And we really detailed how complicated these labels are, even for someone such as you and myself, who have been in this space for quite some time. They're very complicated. So I think you and I are both in agreement that for us, the best option is to opt out of that system so that we are not slaves to these labels and to all the loopholes and all the lobby money that gets attached to it. So you and I both utilize this as what I would call a free market solution, right? We speak with our dollars, and we do that by finding an authentic food supply. Now, I know a lot of people who want to find an authentic food supply, and they don't know how to go about doing it, or when they find a farm, for instance, they're not sure what questions to ask. So I thought it'd be a great idea to have you on and to really dive into this topic of how do you actually find an authentic food supply?
Yes, this is such a great topic because just literally a couple of weeks ago, I had a young couple in at the farm here. They were doing a project and wanted to run some ideas by me, and they're savvy. It's a pretty savvy couple, but they live in an urban sector, and the wife was whatever, complaining about being able to find decent food, and I was sitting there thinking, wait a minute, what? If you're really looking for it, you can find it. And so I would lead here. The number one thing that I would lead off on this discussion is this food is not going to suddenly appear on your doorstep. You have to decide. You have to decide. See, when you think of the time and hours and attention that you've put on what we say on provenance, just as a broad idea of provenance. How are we going to supply our pantry, our table, our kitchen? When you think back of your journey toward this, mine's not as dramatic as yours because we grow almost all our own food here. We've just I always said if we could figure out how to grow Kleenex and toilet paper, we could pretty much pull the plug on society. But you have come to this and developed this, and the sheer effort, time and energy and attention on provenance is significant. And I think the biggest lie that we tell ourselves as people is, well, I can just go on my merry way and have a different outcome without any effort. And Einstein, that's the thing of insanity, right? Is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And so at the outset, we have to be dedicated. I mean, dedicated to at least as much interest in our menu, our provenance for our food, as we are in what our kids are learning in school, the kind of car we're going to buy, the pediatrician we get, those things. We put attention on that. Goodness, a vacation, right? Where are you going to go on vacation? Well, think of the time and planning to that. Well, our body's fuel requires that level of attention as well. It doesn't just magically appear. Fortunately, there are way more options now than there were just 20 years ago, way more options. And that's what we want to talk about. So this includes everything from, finding a farmer, going to farmer's market, getting into the CSA, that's community supported agriculture, that's kind of morphing now with protein boxes and things into more a general, like a food subscription service, like you would subscribe to Netflix, or you would subscribe to a magazine or a newspaper. You can subscribe to food boxes, and it's a wonderful thing that just happens, and farmers like it because they have a loyal customer base, and they can see out in the future, yeah, I've got this many subscriptions and this much stuff I have to grow and all that. It makes a big difference, including visiting a farm. I mean, I think that there is tremendous value in going and visiting, and visiting vicariously. Spend some time on websites, and all of this that I'm discussing: CSA, know your farmer, visiting a farmer, websites, subscription boxes, the entire under the radar provenance train, custody. All of that is a skill that you gradually create over time. You talk to people, you hear who's good, who's not, what's right, what's authentic, what's not. You develop skill at websites. I mean, for example, I had an outfit call me recently and say, we've just been found out about ButcherBox, and they're trying to put themselves as a the homesteaders connection to the food supply. And I'd never been on the website, so I just pull up the ButcherBox website. Look, well, when you click on Meet Our Farmers, you go to the homepage, Meet Our Farmers, and the background picture is 5 Tyson chicken houses. I don't know if they're Tyson, but they're factory chicken houses as the background photograph of Meet Our Farmers people. Well, you don't have to look any farther than that. That's going to be the same supply chain as Kroger's. They're just repackaging it and marketing it differently. And so, this, Shenandoah Organics up here in the Shenandoah Valley, they're a big outfit now. Shenandoah Organics, you go to their website, Meet Our Farmers, and you can meet them. They're nice, families and little kids and holding their kids. And all, they're all standing in front of their big factory chicken houses, organic labeled chicken. And so you don't have to be a rocket scientist to start seeing some of this, picking it up, but it is a skill. It's a skill like any other. And so You don't get a skill by just putting your head in the sand and expecting things to happen. So that's kind of my little quick song and dance scene. I'm glad to hear some of your story on on the effort and maybe some of the things where you thought you were getting good stuff and then it ended up not being good stuff, and you kind of run back and forth.
Yeah, and it did take me a long time to find an authentic food supply, and part of that is because I didn't know anybody else who had an authentic food supply. I wasn't in the circles that I'm in today, so I didn't know who to ask. So I had to do a lot of the research on my own, and what I would say is the work is really it is quite a bit of work up front and a bit of effort up front. But then the good thing is once you have found your handful of farmers, you don't have to keep doing the work, right? It's like you do it, you put the time into it, you find them, you get the food, see if it agrees with you or not. And then the only thing I do is occasionally I check back in, and I ask the farmers, have you changed any of your processes? Are you feeding something different now? So always keep them accountable. But that's the good news, is that it's like an upfront effort, and then you benefit from it, from there on out. So what I would like to do is help people, give them a couple steps to start with. So one thing that really helped me, because I didn't have word of mouth at the time, was different websites. So you can just do an internet search and type in where you live and type in, local farms, and farms will pop up, okay? But now there's actually websites that will help you find the different farms in your area. And I will include several websites in the show description, right? So people can just click on it and see if these different farmers service their area. But some that you and I have mentioned before are eatwild.com, localharvest.org, apppa.org, and then there's farmmatch.com. Another one is eatlocal.com. That one's coming soon. So again, I'll put these in the show notes, but there's these websites that can help direct you to farmers. So usually you go to the website, you type in, your zip code, and it tells you different farmers that are in your area. Now, once you find the farmers in your area, that's not the end of it, right? Because not all farmers are farming equally. So then you have to vet the farmer. And you can start, like you said, go to the easy thing is to go to the actual farm's website, peruse around, see what they say. You want to be looking at this, and I'll get your input on this too. It depends on what you're looking for. If it's produce, for instance, you want to make sure they're not using genetically modified seeds. You want to make sure they're not spraying any pesticides or herbicides, not only on the produce itself, but on the farm. You want to ask where they're getting their water from. They don't have to be certified USDA organic, right? There's lots of loopholes in that label, and it's very expensive for small family farms to get that label. But you want to make sure that they're following certain practices that are aligned with your principles, right? So, and we can go into that in a minute, because I want to get your take on questions to ask the farmer, but these are the steps. So you go to these websites, you find the local farmer in your area, and then you can go to the website. You're looking for a certain language, which we'll talk about in a second. I want to break it down per each category, beef, produce, pastured poultry, and eggs. And then if the website passes your test, then you can call the farm first and ask more detailed questions if they haven't answered them on the website. And then if you can, then you want to go visit the farm, right? That's the final step in the vetting process, is you're going to visit the farm. You're going to trust what they said on the website and the phone, but verify, right? Trust, but always verify. So give them benefit of the doubt, but see it with your own eyes. And so that's my like 3-step process of how to vet my local farmers. And like you've said before, if you can't get to the farm, now there's things, kind of unfortunately, but fortunately in this instant, there's like Google Maps, right? Where you can do the satellite version, you can see what's happening on the farm. You can see, if they move the chickens or whatnot. So anyhow, that's the basic outline. But what I'd like to do, if you're up for it, Joel, is to go into what are they looking for? What types of questions are they going to ask? So let's start with if you're looking for truly pastured poultry and eggs, what would they be looking for? What would they be trying to ask the farmer?
Well, the first thing that they're looking, number one is feed source. Is it GMO free? And but I would say equal with that is how often are they moving? And when you go visit, what you're looking for is green grass and not dirt. And so if they say, yeah, the animals are outside, then you ask, well, is it portable housing or stationary housing? A lot of these outfits are using stationary housing with a yard that the chickens can go out in, but very quickly the yard turns into a barren moonscape and there's no grass there. And chlorophyll is nature's number one detoxicant, so detoxifier. I'm not sure which the proper form of the word is, but so I would, you want GMO free, but if it's not GMO free, what you want to see is make sure those animals are getting a lot of chlorophyll, which comes when they're moved all the time. And like Sina, you pointed out, now with Google Maps, you can actually, if you Google our farm, for example, and look at the Google map on it, you can spot what we call the jet stream. It's where we move the chickens. It's a mosaic, and you can see very clearly where the animals have moved, and they're moving on, and you've got recuperation behind it. It's quite an amazing thing. And so it's movement, green grass, feed source. Those are the main things. And
And I also look for, I look for that they don't feed them antibiotics, right?
right,
They're not, there's no pesticides or herbicides present in the feed or on the land. And
right,
then I ask what they disinfect the chicken meat with and the chicken eggs, right? During the processing, how are they
right,
disinfecting it, right? Are they
right,
using the
right.
chlorine
Uh, uh,
bath
mhm.
or,
Yeah, yeah. Many, even small outfits use some pretty toxic materials as an antimicrobial in the processing, both on eggs and on chickens. And so on chickens, for example, you're wanting them to use, for example, hydrogen peroxide or just a vinegar type acid. We don't use anything here, but when you get into inspection and under inspection, there's got to be some sort of a kill step per the regulations. And so that kill step is can be any number of from chlorine, as toxic as chlorine is, all the way to something as relatively benign as hydrogen peroxide, that just vapors off.
wait,
So
so,
there,
so you don't use anything because yours aren't sold in the store, right? So like you're talking about that inspection step, you can be
yeah,
exempt from it because you're not selling in the grocery store, right? So if
that,
someone went to your
that's
farm
correct. Yeah.
and bought a dozen eggs, those eggs are not treated with the chemical in the processing.
No, that's correct. Even our eggs in the store are not treated. Fortunately, eggs are not required to be treated with anything, but the big producers do treat them with chlorine baths as a disinfectant protection measure. Just it's a cover your tail, cover your tail kind of thing. It's not required in the regulations, but most large farms do that just as a protective measure, so they so they can't be sued.
Hmm.
Um,
What about
so
chicken then? Chicken, is that not actually in the regulation where it has to be, go through a
um,
kill step, or the
well,
chicken does?
the regulation requires a kill step. Now the question is, what will the processor and or the inspector allow as a kill step? And so this is where you start getting into subjective. So the regulation says, the kill step, here are options. Well, there are some inspectors, for example, who don't recognize uh, you know citric acid as a kill step. and so they'll demand chlorine, and so then that becomes this war, this battle between the processor trying to do something better and the inspector who wields all the power and can, it's a, and here you are, you've got this disagreement in the processing facility. The inspector can say, I don't like you, and shut your plant down. You've invested $3 million in this plant. You've got employees standing there waiting for their paychecks. This is not the time for the showdown. And this is exactly what happens. And so you essentially have, you have diplomatic extortion on the part of the bureaucrat who holds all the cards, and the ability to say, okay, now you can butcher chickens now. I'll it's okay. Getting to that point is sometimes a real issue. So yeah, that asking what goes on the bird or the egg, during the processing is a huge question, because that's right before your plate. That's right before you eat it. Sina, I want to pick up, you mentioned several, websites, different things. I want to pick up the Smart Shoppers Guide from Weston A. Price Foundation. It's an index. It's a nationwide directory of farmers that are within the Weston A. Price Foundation network. We pay a nominal amount to be listed there, but WAPF only allows people in there that they have vetted. So it's kind of it's really a strong process. They invite you to be a part of their shopper's guide. So it's by invitation only. And then I pay, I don't know what, $50 a year to be listed in it. So it's kind of a shared thing. But that's a pretty, and it's by state, by food item, all over the country. And of course, because it's Weston A. Price Foundation, they concentrate on livestock, on meat, poultry, dairy, as opposed to produce. But of course, many farms that do offer meat, poultry, and dairy also either have produce or I think this is the thing we need to say, Sina, as people are sleuthing this, realize that there is an entire subculture, an entire subfraternity of people. And those of us in this, like if somebody called me today and say, even though we don't sell produce, and ask me where would I buy produce, I can give them a couple of names of the people in our area that are absolutely the top best, cleanest, produce growers. This authentic community, unfortunately, is not that big. And so most of us know each other. And so what you have to do is get into the fraternity. You've got to get into the fraternity, someplace, somewhere, and then this whole, the whole cornucopia. Then it doesn't just magnificently open up, but you continue to follow leads, and you have more and more leads, another lead, and pretty soon you're finding, oh, I've got 4 options here. I've got 2 options. That's where then you maybe call, you ask some questions, you send an email, you ask some questions, you go visit the farm. If there's a big no trespassing sign, you probably don't want to go to that farm. I've heard it said, if you go to farmer's market and you buy 3 times from a guy or a gal, and by the 3rd time you buy, if they haven't invited you to their farm, you probably shouldn't go back to that, to that vendor. I mean, there are these little kind of subtle things within the spectrum. The other thing that I would like to point out here, you mentioned chemicals, pesticides, fertilizer, and water. I would like to add to that fertility. For me, a big question is, what do you do about fertility? Because what I want to see, I want to see a compost pile. I want to see that there's enough recognition on that farm in situ that there's actually a carbon economy being developed. You might see piles of chips. You might see a bunch of old leaves or hay or a pile of something. But compost is such a foundational element of soil building. Are there other things that farmers use that are probably acceptable? I mean, yeah, things from foliar fish emulsion things, all that, but that should not be in the regenerative space. We're all about building soil, not bringing in amendments from outside, even if it's bycatch from Japanese drift nets in the ocean. Okay, we're trying to develop an on-site carbon integrated situation, which is the way nature builds soil. And so, at the risk of alienating a few folks, a few of my friends, I want to, when I go on a place, I want to see what the fertility, what's your fertility program? How are you building soil? What's your plan? And what's the protocol for soil construction?
Yeah, I love that. So, and that would be whether they're looking for produce or beef or chicken.
Yeah.
It's across the board. We're
Absolutely.
wondering, how are they regenerating the soil, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then so let's, in the time we have remaining, what questions would we ask if you're trying to find authentic beef? So I would want to make sure that they were like rotated on pasture. They weren't, so they're not fed anything but the pasture. There's no GMOs. There's no pesticides or herbicides present in the food or on the land. No antibiotics or hormones administered. And then again, at that processing step, that the meat is not disinfected with chemicals during the processing. What would you?
I've seen it. I think you've got it pretty much. Obviously, you don't want to have these pyrethroid ear tags or implants, ionophore implants. One kind of maybe subtle thing is what are you using for mineral? Because a lot of people use blocks that have other things put in them, even ionophores, like Ralgro. And so there can be some steroid hormone ionophores in liquid blocks. And so we encourage no mineral blocks to be used. It should simply be a dry powder form. So we use dehydrated seaweed. We use Redmond salt, which is a mined salt out in Colorado. Rather than refined white salt, iodized salt. The reason that minerals are important for the animals is because, historically, the bison and deer and elk, the wildlife, they're not bound by fences, so they could move long areas and find charcoal to lick, ashes left over from a fire. They would find mineral springs, mineral deposits, those kinds of things. But when we have these animals confined to our property, they can't go off and find this stuff that they used to find. And so we bring it in for us primarily in the form of dehydrated seaweed that they can have at will. Sometimes they use a lot, sometimes they don't. They will actually fluctuate their intake based on weather, quality of grass, all sorts of things. And so I think for cattle, mineral is one of those kind of subtle nuances that's worth asking about. What do you use for mineral?
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. I had not heard that before. I didn't even know that you gave them minerals. So that's fantastic. Are vaccines an issue? Like, would somebody be giving their cattle vaccines?
Oh, most people do. We don't, but most people do. And that's kind of that would be, I don't know how, you make this list, right? Yeah. So number one is it grass finished, no grain?
Mhm.
Number two is how often do you move them? Are you moving them daily, every other day, weekly, whatever? How long are they being moved to a new, what we call a new salad bar? Um, you mentioned, again, I would say, what's your fertility program? Is your fertility program, for example, bringing in chicken litter from a factory chicken house? A lot of farmers, even organic farmers, that's their fertility program, is bringing in chicken manure from the factory chicken houses that, of course, have dead chickens and bones and feathers and all that. So what's your fertility program? And then, yeah, you're right. No antibiotics and things like that. And then the mineral program, and then finally, probably at the end of the list is vaccine. That's one of the last things that farmers give up. Um, it's, I mean, the veterinarians for sure, push vaccines pretty dramatically, and a lot of farmers are scared to walk away from vaccines. We walked away from vaccines, I don't know what, 40 years ago, and so the vaccine thing is it's a tough one. But boy, if you find a farmer that doesn't use vaccines, you've got a jewel. I can tell you that'll be uncommon.
Well, that's you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're a diamond in the rough. Like,
Yeah, well, but we've been at it a long time and have a lot of confidence, and so all I'm asking is a modicum of charity. If your farmer says, "Yeah, we use vaccines," he's not a bad person. He's just a scared, lacks some confidence. Maybe hasn't done this long enough to build up confidence. Hasn't pulled that plug yet. But
yeah.
if he's pulled these other plugs, if he's moving those cows, if you can see this mosaic, where were the cows last week? Where were the cows the week before? You can see this mosaic and progression. The cows are on a nice, lush vegetation, and they've got some good, unprocessed mineral out there, basic stuff. That's probably vaccine is one of your lower things on the.
Okay, that sounds great, and I agree. What about pastured pork? So for me, and it sounds kind of redundant, I'm looking for rotation on the pasture, that there's no GMOs, pesticides or herbicides present, on the land or in the food. They weren't given any antibiotics. They're not given any hormones, and again, that the meat's not disinfected with chemicals during the processing. But what do you agree, and what else would you add?
Yeah, so on pigs, probably the number one thing. Yeah, you mentioned fresh ground, but is it rotated ground? Pigs are hard on ground. I mean, they dig. They're big, they're heavy, and they're really tough on ground. So the rotation becomes really really critical. But pigs, you can tell a lot by the smell test. If something's not right with pigs, it's going to stink. Now, if something's not right with cows, they can stink too, and certainly chickens can stink, but nothing stinks like a pig if things aren't right. If things aren't right, and so when you visit the farm, trust your eyes and your nose. What and your ears? What are you hearing? Are you hearing contentment, or are you hearing fighting, bellowing, discontentment? You can hear that. uh, One of the favorite things that I hear when people come here is, I come here, I go in your animals, and they all seem happy, and that's what we want the chickens to just be clucking. We don't want them to be acting fearful or stressed. You can hear that. You can see it. Are the cows placid? Are the pigs placid? Do they just come up to you inquisitively and want to nose your breeches and untie your shoelaces? And is it an aesthetically, aromatically pleasant place to be? Because if pigs are in a spot too long, unmanaged, they will stink pretty quickly. And smell on pigs is a big one.
Yeah, I remember when we had our summit last year, our health summit, and you did the farm tour. And I have pictures actually of some of our speakers petting your pigs. Like they were so peaceful. You know, the pigs themselves were so peaceful, and they were so calm and gentle that we could literally just reach over and pet them, and they were okay with it. They were inquisitive about us. Like it looked like they were trying to smell us, you know. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want to take that home with me.
Right, right. That's right.
But yeah. So if you haven't had a chance to go to a farm like Joel's farm, I highly suggest you go, especially if you have children. Right, it
Yes.
helps connect them with their food supply, and they can see, especially because I was born and raised in California, and you see lots of rows and rows of crops, right? Even on these supposed organic farms, you'll see they do a lot of monocropping. So it's just rows and rows of corn or rows and rows of soy, and you can see that the soil's bare. It's dry. There's no cover crops. It's bad. And so that's what I was raised with, and I thought that was what a farm was, and until really I came out here and went to your farm, and I thought, whoa, this is like what you would see in a storybook,
Mm.
about like going off on an adventure to this cool farm. So, and my kids love it. One thing I want to mention is you talk about, you've told me this before, if you want to tell the story um, about if you go to the farm and you can actually see worms in the soil, right? It's something that you're looking
Yeah.
for.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're drilling down pretty deep here, Cena, but yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Look, if you visit a farm in a month after frost, especially in the spring, you want to actually be able to see earthworm castings on top of the soil. These are little mounds that you can see. And if you part the grass, and look down in there, you should be able to see things. Yeah, you should be able to see spiders. A lot of spider webs. Visit at different times of the day. Go early in the morning, go late in the evening. Are there bats flying around at dusk? Are there indigo buntings? Um,
Like you
are
want to
there
see
are there
diversity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Are there if there are riparian areas, pond, creek, that sort of thing, are the banks vegetated? Um, do they have cattails? Are there red-winged blackbirds on the cattails? This is the kind of life. I mean, the what I'm trying to suggest is that a commercial farm, if it's managed properly, it has a lot of the nuances of a quote unquote park, from a beauty standpoint and a biodiversity standpoint. We're not in a competitive situation here. We're in a complementary situation with nature. And so we purposely fence out edges from the cows. So there are bushes and habitat, um, forestal zones, riparian zones, wild habitats, within the greater, commercial production areas. And so, this idea of, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, mile after mile after mile of corn and soybean, monocrop with an extremely occasional clump of trees or something is that's not nature. Nature's about diversity and a lot of animal life. And so we want you to feel that we want you to hear buzzing and insects and grasshoppers and all sorts of things going on, because it's that diversity that's really a big deal.
Yeah, what you don't want is like one of those big farms where they have like just cows out on, it's like there's just dirt everywhere.
Right.
They're out on the dirt, trying to find a little blade of grass or whatnot. And that's what I was raised around. It's just cows out there on dirt, and they have this little trough that they eat from and drink from. I remember when we went out to your farm one time, my kids were like, "Where are the pigs? Where are they?" Like you couldn't even see them because they're out there amongst all the trees and in the bushes and stuff. You have to go out and walk around and try to find them. Like
Right, right.
they're off in nature now. But now we're almost out of time. I want to wrap up with what we would look for growing produce, okay, and trying to find authentic produce. So I'll start us out. Um, So I would want to know, first of all, if they're using GMO seeds. What's the pest control program, right? What's the weed control program? Are you spraying pesticides or herbicides, to control weeds or whatnot? What are you applying to the crops? Do you till the soil? How do you fertilize the soil? Are you applying biosolids to your land? Right. This is actually a big deal. Applying biosolids. And then like where will the water come from that you're irrigating your crops with? And then finally, once the produce is harvested, are you waxing it? You know, surprisingly, some local farms I have found do wax their produce. So that's something I want to avoid. We go into that in our book. We just, grass chemicals can be in there, fungicides can be in there. It's up to them what they want to put in the wax. But those are my big ones that I'm looking for in produce. What about you?
Yeah, yeah. I would say I appreciated you bringing up the tillage deal. I would say in general, what is the soil covered with? When you look at that produce, do you see a lot of soil, or is the soil mulched? Either mulched, or the plant canopy so heavy that you don't even see soil. Either one of those is okay. So the main thing is you don't want to see bare soil on any farm visit whatsoever, whether it's livestock produce or whatever. You want to see vegetation, not bare soil. I mean, that's just foundational to all soil regeneration. And so yeah, I think your list is pretty good. And then the acid test is taste it.
Yeah.
Taste it. There's a lot of difference between a nutrient dense carrot and a non-nutrient dense carrot. One tastes like cardboard and one tastes like I don't know, cotton candy. There's a big difference in the taste. Produce is something that texture, taste, juiciness and taste. Those are things that really come through in produce.
Yeah, when my children and I finally decided to grow our own carrots, just as a fun little experiment they wanted to do, we grew carrots and then we compared them to the store-bought carrots, right? Side by side taste test. And my kids were so hooked. It was like a flavor explosion in our mouth. The flavor profile was so deep. We had no idea that a carrot could taste that flavorful, And I thought, wow, this would really deter us from eating sweets, right? Growing your own fruits and vegetables, or getting them from your local farmer, because they are so flavorful. It made me not even want to go and get a cookie or a brownie. This is a common battle with kids, right? Trying to get them off the sweets. But yeah, there's really just
maximum joy. Yeah.
It's really just nothing like it. And so now they're hooked. So now they want to grow all kinds of stuff. They're growing cotton. Right. So it's like, we're not going to eat the cotton, but we're going to stuff things with it. So we have our own organically raised, or regeneratively raised cotton that we're going to use instead of relying on the GMO cotton.
Yeah. Elliot Coleman, who's kind of the guru of gardening in the US, he told me that he knew he'd arrived finally when he found out from his customers that in the school, the lunch packs, that they pack for their kids to go to school, that his baby carrots traded high, kids trade food, right? They sit down and they trade food, right? And he found out that his baby carrots had the highest trade value of anything else in the school lunches, including sweets. He said, that's when I knew that I had arrived in having really high authentic produce. So that's a good standard. But Sina, this has been great to actually drill down on this. And I think if we could say one thing to people, it's there. It's there. It may not be on your doorstep, but it is there, and you can discover it just like you would discover anything else that you're interested in. a spouse, a vacation package, just like you would discover anything else that you're interested in, you can discover this. It's here. It's way more available now than it was 20 years ago. And I think my encouragement is just jump into it, jump into that fraternity, and follow your leads, and pretty soon you'll be amazed at what you found.
Yeah, and I want to add too. So you have to do the initial sleuthing, like we're talking about doing. And again, I'll put the websites up there to help you narrow these things down. But after you've done the initial sleuthing, it can actually just appear on your doorstep, right? Because a lot of these places now deliver.
Yeah.
Like, Polyface delivers,
Yeah.
a lot of the farms now will actually ship. So, like we've ordered some items from a farm that was over in Idaho, and they shipped to us, just sampling different things. So you don't have to go to the farm every time you want to pick up your food, right? We're not saying go to the farm every week to go, pick up your produce or
No.
your meat. We're not saying that at all. We're saying that, you can actually get it delivered to your doorstep, or you can do like, so we get some stuff delivered when we need it. And we also subscribe to, like, you have a monthly drop off, right?
Right.
Your farm drops off throughout areas of Virginia once a month, for most of the months of the year. And so we go once a month to pick up our meat, and we bought one of those stand up freezers so that we can go maybe once every 3 months instead of having to go once a month. We just stockpile our meat. So you don't have to, put in all this effort and time every week just to procure your groceries for that week, right? The initial effort is up front doing the sleuthing, but we've helped you with that. We're going to give you the websites, we gave you the questions to ask, and now just do the work up front, and then figure out which way you want it best brought to you, delivery, CSA pickups, you name it. So I think it's really that easy.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And so we encourage everyone to just opt out. That this is a continuation of last week's problem with this new GMO labeling law that is a complete charade, if you will. And so the way to protect yourself is not to ask for government protection. It's just to look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm going to protect me. I'm going to protect my family, and just begin opting out of the conventional food platforms, and you'll be amazed. You won't find maybe every single thing. I mean, we still get our bananas at the store. We haven't grown bananas yet, but you can find, do the 80-20 rule. If you get the 80 right, the 20 isn't as important. Getting the 80 right is important.
Sounds great. All right. Thank you, Joel. Thank you for all your insight and expertise. I really appreciate it. I think our listeners appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you all next week. Bye bye.